Hello, Audioholics. This is Logan, and today we are going to be doing the wrong opinion on the Killers.
The killer.
They just released a new album a couple days ago. This will be going out after our Audioholics unite on the new album, but before we go any further, I would like to introduce the human slave, Tyler.
Hello.
That is what Tyler says.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say as an introduction, so hello.
Hello! All right, so
Hello.
should we get on this?
I will say one thing. I said in the Audioholics Anonymous that I was going to listen to Imploding the Mirage again. I did not end up having time to do that. So for me, guys, college just started, so I've been very, very busy, and I didn't really have time. So I apologize for that, but my opinion's going to be pretty much the same as Audioholics Anonymous. All right.
Yeah. So let's start off with Hot Fuss.
Hot Fuss. So you said I'm going first, right?
Yeah, you go first.
All right, so Hot Fuss is S tier, and this is my favorite Killers album. I think this album is the most straight up like rock of all of the albums they've made. There's more focus on, guitar parts, rock and roll aspects. This is maybe the only album that I would consider just straight up indie rock, right? Sam's Town is pretty close, but they start introducing more like synth pop elements in that album, and then they basically just go full synth pop in the next one. This is the only real true rock and roll record. And to that fact, that might be why I prefer it over all the other albums that the Killers have made. But I would also say it's not just because it's more rock. I think the songs are more memorable. I mean, from the very first song, Jenny Was a Friend of Mine. That's one of my favorite bass riffs ever. Mr. Brightside has a fantastic chorus with a great chord progression. Smile Like You Mean It is killer. Somebody Told Me is one of my favorite songs. And all the way through the album, And To Your Star, Change Your Mind, every song is just amazing. The vocal performance is intense. He does more impressive vocals on this album than any other album following it, including Sam's Town. He does more, I don't know if I would say screaming per se, but, screaming. He does more like bluesy screaming than any other record, which is pretty impressive. I think that the guitar player, I forget his name. He's actually not on the latest album, which is why that wasn't very guitar-centric at all. Forget his name, but he's a big reason why this
really that guitar-centric, though.
Huh?
The last few weren't really that guitar-centric. Like, starting with, like, Day and Age.
There were riffs, there were solos, there were, like, elements of guitar in there. There's basically none of that in the latest one. We'll get to that. That's a big reason why I didn't like that album as much. But, yeah, so that's why Hot Fuss is my favorite Killers album.
Right. So, I actually kind of wrestled with this one a little bit because Hot Fuss is a very good album. It's not the best one. And first reason, Mr. Brightside is just kind of overrated. It's like, I don't like the whole like pseudo rap thing, I guess, that he does, where it's just like, I don't know, like if you want to have like rap, don't have that vocal style. I don't know. It just felt a little bit off.
But the chorus is awesome, right?
I don't know. That's like probably I think the verse is the more memorable part of the song. But anyway, that, and I think the album kind of starts to peter off a little bit. All these things that I do or All These Things That I Have Done, rather, that is my favorite song on the album. It's pretty much like the epic on this album, which they did on Sam's Town, and then they, as far as I'm aware, they didn't really do anything epic really ever again,
Not really.
which is kind of a shame. But you know, there's also Andy, You're a Star, Change Your Mind. Those are some pretty good, really good songs that are less talked about. But overall, I think it is a very good album. Don't get me wrong, it is still a 10 out of 10. I just think, and I used to think it was their best album until I listened to Sam's Town again. Spoiler alert. But yeah, I can definitely say this, though. This is one of the best debut albums of all time.
I agree to that. So do you want to just segue straight into Sam's Town then?
Yep.
So Sam's Town. This is going to be also S rank below Hot Fuss for me. So the reason why I put this a little lower, like the songs are about the same quality, I would say. But instrumentally, I think the album is more diverse. It's more experimental. It's more interesting instrumentally. Vocally, however, he goes for a completely different style. You know, I was saying like he does more bluesy screams and more like he puts more passion into his vocals in the first album. Where, well, I mean, it's not a bad performance, but he takes a lot of that away in favor of a more indie vocal style. For lack of a better term, it's very monotone. I mean, it's not bad. Don't get me wrong. It isn't bad. I mean, Brandon Flowers is one of the best parts of this band throughout all of the albums, but you can definitely feel the downgrade. And for a band that is as focused on melodies and vocals as the Killers, I think that takes enough away from the album that I prefer it less. But again, that doesn't mean that the album is any like worse in quality. You have some amazing songs on this record. Sam's Town. I actually really love the like transition tracks, Interlude and Exitlude. Kind of ridiculously named, but I really like them. They're really nice. Bones is my favorite song. That song's killer. No pun intended. When You Were Young has always been one of my favorite songs. I first heard it in Guitar Hero 3, I think, and that's how I immediately fell in love with the Killers. It was that song. I actually heard that song before I heard Mr. Brightside. Fun fact. Yeah. So, yeah, this album is just fantastic. Uncle Johnny's another great song, by the way. The River is Wild is just a wild song. That's another favorite of mine. Yeah, overall, fantastic album. I prefer it slightly less to Hot Fuzz just because the vocals are less cool to me.
Also, throughout like the creation of my notes, I would just like to point out that I kept thinking it was Hot Fuzz because of that one movie.
Yeah. It actually, like, now that you say that, I wonder if it's a play on the movie's name.
I don't know. Which one came first?
Well, this came out in 2004, so I would say the movie, probably.
Okay, I don't know when that came out, but anyway.
Let me look it up. You can go on to talk about Sam's Town.
Anyway.
Answer, Hot Fuss came out first.
Okay.
Okay, go on.
All right, so for me, I thought Sam's Town was better than Hot Fuss because so I was praising, you know, all these things that I've done as like the major epic. Killers were like, okay, let's just go all out on this album. We're going to give you not only another epic, but two epics that are like 3 parts long that are absolutely amazing. I mean, like, the entire album kind of has a bit of a Bruce Springsteen feel, especially like in the first epic with When We Were Young and Interlude, the title track, things like that. Instrumentally, like he said, very experimental. Definitely, I think the experiments paid off for the most part on this album. It's just a much grander statement than Hot Fuss. Not to take anything away from Hot Fuss, it has amazing qualities. Again, both 10 out of 10. This is just slightly more perfect. But Uncle Johnny is probably my favorite song. That amazing bluesy riff is amazing. Bones is pretty good too. If I remember, that's kind of like a more upbeat sounding song, right? Like a more dance oriented song.
It's more upbeat, yeah.
Yeah, if I remember right. It's better lyrically. I think it's just everything is proved. Everything is improved from an already amazing debut, and that's really all I have to say. Just these two albums specifically, and one I will get to in a moment. If you want to get into the Killers, these two albums right here.
I agree. These are the ones you start with, and maybe you like the later albums, maybe you don't, but those are the ones you start with anyway. So the next album we're going to talk about is Day and Age. Now, originally, I was going to put this in B tier, but as we've been talking, I realized that I actually really liked that album a lot more than I thought I did. So I'm going to put that in A tier, actually. It's going to be my only A tier pick. Day and Age is the only album in their discography that can be described as dance pop. And I think that's to the benefit of the band. They took the best part of like the synth aspect of their projects, and they incorporated it into this album. The band has said two things about this album that I think perfectly encapsulate why I love it. First of all, they said it's a sequel to Sam's Town, but it's like if you were looking down at Sam's Town from a spaceship. That is the perfect way to describe this album. They also have said that it's their most playful record, and I can agree wholeheartedly to that. It's an upbeat album. It's a fun album. It's full of amazing grooves and great melodies and cool lyrics. This is a huge departure stylistically from Sam's Town and Hot Fuss, but I think it works, and I think that where they go from here as they try to mature their sound, I think maybe they shouldn't have done that. They should have stayed in this lane for at least a little bit longer. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, so we have very different opinions. This is a C tier album for me. I thought the entire thing as a whole was very dull. I think it was very boring. There are some pretty good songs, especially towards the end. This Is Your Life and Neon Tiger, I would say, are probably the biggest highlights on this album.
Yeah, I just realized I didn't talk about any of the songs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly,
I would say like Joyride was maybe my favorite. I really loved how upbeat that was. Also, Dustland Fairy Tale was great.
yeah. Honestly though, I listened to this album twice because I wanted to see if I was missing something, and no, it just went in one ear and out the other. Um, I mean, I didn't hear what he was saying before about this being like a part two to Sam's Town. That concept does sound pretty interesting, and maybe I should listen a little bit closer with that in mind. But as of right now, honestly, even with that though, I don't know if I would bring it any higher than a C. Maybe a B, but that's probably not. It's just a very boring album. Very good lyrically, don't get me wrong, but I mean, Human is like what? That's ripped from like a Hunter S. Thompson quote, I guess, is what he told me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a more refined vocal set. He brought that up in Sam's Town. I thought it was more or less the same as Hot Fuss. I didn't really notice a difference, but maybe I'd need to go back and listen to that again. But here, and I think for the rest of their discography, he kind of adopts sort of a, well, U2 influence, to put it lightly. Basically,
Yeah.
sounds a lot like Bono. And That, I think, is maybe a controversial decision, but I think objectively it may, like, I feel like between Sam's Town and Day and Age, he probably met up with a vocal coach and learned how to really expand his range and sing a lot cleaner and a lot clearer, I think. Does he lose some personality? Yes, that is the trade off. But I think just from a technical standpoint, he is better on this album and all the albums following it. So, yeah, more dance pop feel. I don't really like that. I mean, I like dance pop. I just don't think it was executed very well on this album. There's no songs. There are songs I would want to dance to, but not any songs that I would remember. Like, I just listened to this like 3 hours ago, and the only song I vaguely remember is Humans. So that's my opinion. Let's move on to the next one.
All right, we're moving on to Battleborn, and basically take literally everything he said about not Hot Fuss, about Day and Age, and apply it to Battleborn. That's my opinion. I think Battleborn is by far the Killer's worst album. They took all of the fun and all of the playfulness and all of the grooves out of the music, and they made boring, just monotone music that you just put in the background and, I don't know, drink some beer to. It's just not good. I would choose practically any album in their discography and practically any indie rock album I've ever heard over this one. In fact, like, I was so bored and annoyed by that, like, halfway through the album, I think I was on A Matter of Time, and I was like, is this fucking thing over yet? I feel like I've been listening to it for a century. And I'm like, what? I have like 7 songs to go? Fuck this album. I sat through the whole thing, and I just did not like it at all. So this is my C tier album. This is by far the worst Killers album for me. Now, despite how harsh I'm being, I will admit begrudgingly that it is still a Killers album, so it doesn't deserve a D or an F. But it's a really bad Killers album, put it that way.
Right. So this, for me, I think is a step up. I think that it kind of goes back a little bit to the indie rock sounds, not entirely, still more so a dance pop record, or still more so a pop record. And
yeah, it's poppy. It's more synth wavy than
yeah,
even
and
Day
they
and
kind
Age
of continue it, and they kind of continue with that sound to this day. So
yeah, they do.
Yeah. So that being said, it added a lot of variety throughout. I would not say that Day and Age lacked variety, but I think it was maybe a little bit more samey than something like Battleborn. Here With Me, that's a really it's such a touching song, and Be Still is very soulful. I think, like, there's a lot more soul just generally in this album, especially in those two, which I consider to be highlights. I would say, like I said, so it's an improvement, but not quite up to the standards of the first two. And like he said, well, honestly, I think that I use the fact that this is a Killers album sort of against it. I think if this was released by any other band, this would have ranked a lot higher, not because it's a bad album, but not because the Killers are bad or anything, but because they've already set too high of a standard. You've already released your 2 best albums right out of the gate, and we know that they can't really improve on that, and I think they know that as well, so they aren't trying to do Sam's Town again. They aren't trying to do Hot Fuss again. They are trying to do Day and Age and Battleborn again. And it's a pretty good album. I would not say start with it, but I think if you want a pretty diverse album, check this one out.
All right, and that moves us on to Wonderful, Wonderful.
Wonderful.
I liked this album a fair amount more than I liked Battleborn. I don't think it's really anywhere near as good as Day and Age, but it's still a good album. I am gonna put it in C tier though, above Battleborn. And the main reason for that is it's a little bit of a step up, but it's not such a step up that it deserves to be on the same level as the next album. And I'll just end it there because I don't really have anything else to say. This album was kind of very unremarkable.
You know what? I'm kind of the same. I don't have much to say, not for lack of, being remarkable or whatever.
Just to interrupt you real quick. Run for Cover was on this album. That's one of my favorite Killers songs.
Yes.
Even if you don't like the rest of the album, check that song
That
out.
is a great album. That is a great song. I think that was one of my highlights too. But for me, it's an A tier album. I think it's these albums, I think, are getting progressively better. I don't think that they will ever release anything as good as Hot Fuss or Sam's Town, but they are making a very good attempt at it. And actually, I don't know. I say that at the rate that they're going, I think that maybe I'm very excited for their next album.
Me too.
Yeah, but yeah, it is getting progressively more pop as the albums go on as well. Title track, The Man, Run for Cover, as he said, amazing song. And The Calling, I think, are my favorite songs. Still a lot of variety, and like I said, not really a lot to say about this one, apart from the fact that it is very good and better than a lot of people say. A lot of people say this was kind of a disappointment. It's better than 2 of their albums. How is this a disappointment? But nah, Wonderful, Wonderful is wonderful.
All right, and that brings us to their most recent album, which I already gave away, is a B tier record. Now, you can see my rankings are a little bit more negative than Logan's. That's because I don't really like the direction they took after Day and Age. So you can really mark up the stylistic changes of the Killers like this. You have Sam's Town and Hot Fuss in one category, where they were still a rock and roll band, like a post-punk indie rock and roll band, right? Sure, Sam's Town started introducing more synth and new wave elements, but it was still at its heart a rock and roll record. However, with Day and Age, they took a sharp turn into pop and synth and new wave, and I enjoyed it for what it was. It's not on the same level as Sam's Town and Hot Fuss. That's why I put it in A tier, not in S tier. And then after that album, they took everything I liked about that album out of it. Like, I enjoyed the humor in it. I enjoyed the playfulness and the upbeat aspects to it. And they took that out in Battleborn, and it never really comes back. And that includes Imploding the Mirage. I think Imploding the Mirage, that's as far as they can go with this sound. I think the next album, you were saying you were excited, I think they need to do something different. They've made 3 albums with the exact same style, and they need to change it. This is as far as they're going to go with this, synth pop new wave style. I think that the Killers has only, 6 albums, 6 studio albums?
Yeah.
They have a longer shelf life than this. They have got to make another turn somewhere. I don't know whether that means they're going to go, I don't know, maybe into like a trip hop direction. I have no idea what they would do, but they'd be really good at it.
Yeah.
I just think that this like serious, mature, indie, new wave sound, it's run its course with Imploding the Mirage. And I know I've talked more about the discography of the Killers in this section than I have the actual album. Let me talk about the actual album for a second. So we listened to this album on the podcast, and my impression of it was that it's a good album. I gave it an 8 out of 10, and I do stick by that. but there are some songs on it that I didn't really like. My Own Soul's Warning, I didn't like. I don't think I liked Lightning Fields. I think my favorite song was Fire and Bone. I don't really remember. Overall, oh no, Imploding the Mirage was maybe like my favorite song. I don't remember. Anyway, point is, like, the album overall for me was kind of samey. The vocals were not memorable. Like, Wonderful Wonderful arguably had better melodies than Imploding the Mirage. The only reason Wonderful Wonderful isn't in B tier with Imploding the Mirage is because it still sounds like Battleborn, and I didn't like Battleborn at all. Imploding the Mirage is
Would
a
you
much
say it's
better
like a
record.
more refined Battleborn, though?
Wonderful Wonderful? Maybe just more of Battleborn and the songs that
I guess.
were good on Battleborn. But Imploding the Mirage is definitely not Battleborn 3.0. It's definitely a maturation of the sound.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's way better than both Wonderful Wonderful and Battleborn. Either way, I'm rambling a little bit. My point is that overall, the album is not on the same level as Hot Fuss, Sam's Town, or Day and Age, and that's why it's got to be in B tier for me.
Okay. So I've actually listened to Imploding the Mirage a couple times, or I listened to it twice, rather. I listened to it once on the podcast and another time earlier today. And I've also listened to a couple of the songs on it because my brother is listening to it a lot. And all I can say is, yeah, so S tier. It kind of continues the same pop rock sound, but I think they're constantly refining it. Like you can see right here, it's like masterpiece, masterpiece, not as good, slightly better, masterpiece. And considering we have that trajectory, I am very optimistic for what the Killers have store in the future. This is very close to being a classic, and I don't know. This album has only been out for a few days as of our recording of this. But, and as a result of that, we don't necessarily know how this album will be looked back on, since it's still fresh in a lot of people's minds. I think it will be looked up at in the same tier as something like Hot Fuss and Sam's Town. You have Caution, which features an outstanding solo from Lindsey Graham. You have, what was the one song? Blowback, which I don't know. I don't know if anybody agrees with me on this, but the backing to it kind of sounds a little bit like Get Lucky from Daft Punk, which, I mean, if you sound like Daft Punk, that's never a bad thing. I mean, is it still a pop record? Yes, but I think that what they should do is they should try something different. I don't know about trip hop necessarily, but something, either do that or kind of go back to the original sound, because we know the original sound works.
I don't think they should go back to a rock sound. I think, like, when bands try to do that, they end up making albums like Hardwired. Or even worse, Death Magnetic.
Well, I mean, those weren't necessarily bad albums, though. Like, are they as
No,
good?
but it means
No,
you're going to
but
take a step back from your masterpiece level album, you know?
I guess you're right. So, I don't know. Maybe they should. You're right. They should probably try something different. Maybe, like, you could even, like, do a rock sound, but try a different kind of rock sound. Maybe, like...
I would love to hear a heavier Killers album.
Yeah, maybe.
They had some
I don't
really
know.
good, like, bluesy songs on the first two records.
Yeah. Or, you know what? Maybe you could even, like, get rid of this whole, like, pop rock fusion and just go straight pop. I mean, that's what a lot of indie acts are doing nowadays. Like,
Yeah,
you could
but
go...
do you really want to turn into Maroon 5?
I would want to reserve judgment, because I don't know. I wouldn't think it would be as bad as Maroon 5, But I think that them going in that direction, first of all, it would help them sell better. Second of all, I think it would kind of scratch the itch that we are having of sort of sameness. But as of right now, I would still say this is the closest thing to a masterpiece since Sam's Town. Um, the only one of the songs I will say though that isn't very good is Fire and Bone. That one kind of brought back like um Battleborn or Day and Age vibes for me, and I didn't really like that one. But there's a lot more experimentation, and again, a solo from Lindsey fucking Buckingham of Fleetwood Mac. How do you go wrong with that? But
I
yeah,
don't know. It wasn't all that great when I heard it before. If you had told me that was some random hobo on the street who did the solo, I wouldn't
honestly,
have
I think I
questioned it.
remember if I remember right in the podcast, that was like I think you were like talking about something. I'm like, Tyler, shut up. This is an amazing solo. Like, I didn't even know who it was at the time. I only found out later that Lindsey Buckingham was on this album. And I thought it was amazing. So it's not just star power by name, it's star power by experience. So that's really all I have to say. Do you have anything to add?
I would say, like, I can understand your hype about imploding the Mirage, but I think in a year you're going to move that down to at least an A. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as Hot Fuss or Sam's Town. I think it's a good album, but it's just not that strong. You know, I don't think it's going to have that kind of sustainability.
I will concede to that point as long as you give this album maybe another listen. I think that you should give this album another listen, and then
Yeah,
maybe
right.
I mean maybe you might not like the album, but I feel like maybe you might bring it up to an A. Whether it's above or below Day and Age remains to be seen. But I think that it is it's not as boring as you think it is. I
I
think it's
really
way better.
wanted to listen to this album again. I just didn't have time.
I
And, like,
understand
we
that.
needed to get this Wrong Opinion recorded.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because, like, I don't think we're going to have time to do it between now and Thursday, and that's, like, the cutoff point. So,
Yeah, I mean like we got, we have what is it? Yeah, I mean like, we got a double dip. We got a double dip on this album.
yeah, pretty much. What I
And
will
yet
say is that, like,
views.
although I have been kind of harsh of a few albums, I have very thoroughly enjoyed my time listening to The Killers overall, and I wouldn't take back listening to any one of these albums. I'm glad I heard them all. That
Yeah.
includes Battleborn. I mean, honestly, as far as Battleborn's concerned, I kind of forgot about this until we were talking about Imploding the Mirage. But you remember Battleborn opened with, like, 8-bit music?
What the fuck? I don't remember that.
Yeah, it opens with, like, SNES sounding shit,
Oh, maybe.
which was
That's
kind of funny.
insane. I actually don't remember that, and I'm the one fucking hyping it up. But, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a fun time. And for any of you who have heard, like, Mr. Brightside and you're kind of cautious, like, should I explore The Killers more? Absolutely.
Yes.
Mr. Brightside's a great song. I don't dislike it like he does, but they have so many better songs. And even if you still love Mr. Brightside, it's your favorite song, there's so many songs that you will still like a shit ton, you know?
All right. So, did you want to go over your list one more time?
Sure. So on my list, I have Hot Fuss at the number 1 spot, and then Sam's Town, Day and Age, Imploding the Mirage, Wonderful, Wonderful, and finally, Battleborn.
All right. And on my list, we have Sam's Town, Hot Fuss, and Imploding the Mirage, all S tier. We have Wonderful Wonderful as an A tier. We have Battleborn as a B tier, and we have
Yeah.
Day and Age as a C tier. And Day and Age is the only album that I would never in a million years want to go back to. Like, it's not a terrible album, which is why we didn't include a D or an F or anything like that. But it's just I don't know. If he sees something in it, then maybe you guys will too, but I thoroughly erased it from my memory, and I don't see myself listening to this on my own for any reason.
Should we announce the next wrong opinion here? 'Cause we
Uh,
already decided on it, right?
yes, we did.
Okay, good. You can do it.
Yes, so our next wrong opinion, this was actually supposed to be our last wrong opinion, but we moved this one up ahead. System of a Down.
There you go.
System of a Down syndrome. So,
Oh, and we also have the Beatles in the works.
yeah, we have more Beatles stuff. He still has to record some videos on that.
Yeah.
We're still listening to Beatles albums. I haven't actually been taking notes, so I'll probably need to do that. But
I've been taking like very rigorous notes.
yeah. All right, so that's all.
That's all, motherfucker. We need a better outro.
Keep on audio holicking.
No, fuck you.